Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored today to have a speaker in our midst who operates at the highest levels of strategic enlisted leadership. She is the senior enlisted advisor to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Frank Grass, and advises him on all things enlisted, as well as strategic leadership initiatives across the entire total force. She represents our Air National Guard and our Army National Guard to the Chief, making sure that our voice is heard, and then comes back to us and tells us what we need to know about strategic vision. It's indeed my honor and privilege to have her here on our stage to talk to the graduates of 13-4 and 13-5. Chief, thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Come on, you've got to do better than that. Good morning. Oh, that just makes my heart sing. Okay, now is my mic on, the lavalier? We're good back there? I wanted to make sure that you can hear. Okay, I've got the thumbs up. Colonel Cathcart, sir, it's great to be back in your house. Chief Master Sergeant Felch and Mrs. Felch, yes, truly an honor to be back here. And we had a lovely time last night at the Chief's house, and thank you so much for the fellowship. It was wonderful. Chief Master Sergeants, First Sergeants, Airmen, Coast Guardsmen, distinguished guests, friends, family, our incredible, incredible families. Thank you so much for what you do. You are truly our nation's unsung heroes. Thank you for being here and for supporting these airmen, this graduating class. How about a round of applause for our families? Academy team, amazing professionals. They come here every day prepared to give you their very best. You just had an amazing education, and it's because of this incredible Academy team that they brought forth, they armed you with the right skills and tools for you to go forward and be professional and successful in your endeavors. And I thank the Academy instructors very much for all that they have done as well. And of course, the reason we're here today, most importantly, our graduates, our NCO Academy and our Airman Leadership School graduates. It's my distinct honor today to be able to spend time with you and address this class. Normally, I come prepared with a 3-ring binder with a very well thought out, laid out, formalized speech. And I did a little recon earlier on with your class, and I said, do you want to hear the formal speech all written out, and I go through it paragraph by paragraph, point by point, or would you like to hear, kind of a story with some leadership points tied in? And the word that I got back was, let's hear the story with the leadership points. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something a little bit different today, and I'm going to take a page from the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and the Director of the Air National Guard, General Welsh and General Clark. And, they talk all the time about every airman has a story. Tell the story, tell the story. So I'm going to do that today, and my hope is that the graduates of this class, I talked to you about that yesterday, that when you go back home, that you learn your airman's story and that you tell your story to your airmen as well. I'm asking that you do. For to lead your airmen, you must know every aspect of their life and know them inside and out. Okay, it's important. As ambassadors for the United States Air Force, the total force, active, Guard, and Reserve, and to our Coast Guardsmen as well, we have an inherent responsibility to tell the American public, the community, the Air Force story. It's important that we do that. So today I'm going to share part of my story, and I'm going to discuss 10 leadership points, reflection points, that have been significant in my career. So part of mine, I have note cards here to keep me on track because I could just kind of go in all kinds of bunny trails and that wouldn't be good, because I know that the colonel reminded me the car is running, right? Okay, so we want to make sure that you get on the road in a safe, timely manner. So part of my Air Force story is my family story. And my family story starts with my father. My father served in the Korean War. He served above the 38th parallel. He was a United States Army soldier, and he didn't talk about his time in the Korean War. He still doesn't to this day. I may never know his story. But he came back, and years later, he joined the Minnesota Army National Guard. And he worked his way through the enlisted ranks. He became an E8, a first sergeant, and later on was commissioned as a chief warrant officer too. Very proud of his service. 22 years he retired from the Minnesota Army National Guard. But he doesn't talk about his story. My husband is a retired United States Marine, hoorah, and I know his story. I know his story very well, and for perhaps some of the spouses in here that have military, spouses, they would say, yeah, we know their stories all too well, if you know what I'm saying, okay? I've heard his stories, but it's good to know that. It's good to know the things that he had to endure and go through to be a very successful Marine. My oldest stepdaughter, she joined the California Air National Guard. She did a 6-year enlistment and deployed to Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and all those things. It is because of the training that she received in the Air National Guard and the skills that she picked up that has made her a very successful businesswoman today. And I'm proud of her for her service. And our daughter spent 2 years in college, Air Force ROTC. I had such high hopes that she was going to wear Air Force blue. And after a couple years, she said, Mom and Dad, you got it covered. Okay. I still have hope, though. I keep telling her that the Air National Guard, the United States Air Force, will always be there for you. And I continue to tell her about, all the benefits and all that goes with serving in our military. So it's important to tell the stories, and why? Why is it important that I stand up on this stage today? This is not about Chief Jelinski Hall. This is about the story because it inspires others. It encourages others. You're able to look up at perhaps an individual and just put a different face on if you need to and say, gosh darn it, if they can do it, so can I. Chief Felch is the commandant of this incredible academy. If he can be the commandant, you can be that commandant. You can be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force or the Air National Guard Command Chief or the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief of the National Guard Bureau. Each and every one of you can do it. And I believe that. I believe in you. It's important to tell the stories. It's important to be able to look up the leadership chain and see yourself there. So that's why I'm going to do it. And you think about the story of General Grass. General Frank Grass spent 12 years as an enlisted soldier. And here he is today, a 4-star general, the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That could be you. All right, so here we go. To better set the stage, I grew up in central Minnesota, just outside of Little Falls, the heartland of Minnesota. I grew up on an 80-acre farm. We knew what hard work was. For any of you that grew up on a farm or have a farm, you understand what goes on there. And it was hard work. And I had other siblings. I was number 3 of 6, so I had that whole middle kid going on. You know what that's about, some of you perhaps. But, we understood what it meant to be out all day picking rocks. Okay, for those of you that don't know what that is, ask your buddy. Baling hay, fixing fence, taking care of the farm animals, all that went with that. But we were raised with traditional values. Traditional values like hard work, perseverance. We had to work together. So we learned teamwork. We learned that you give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, that your word was your bond, and a handshake sealed the deal. We grew up with those traditional values, our family did. For those of you that are familiar with Little House on the Prairie, that was my schoolhouse, not literally, but that's the type of schoolhouse I went to. It was a 1-room country school in central Minnesota. When we had one teacher that taught all 12 grades, every subject. Now think about that for a minute. One teacher, all grades, every subject. Can you imagine how much time I got for math, science, history? Yeah, minutes, right? So that speaks to my early education, that foundation, that core foundation. So what's the point here? Oh, and by the way, there was no indoor plumbing in central Minnesota. And I didn't walk uphill both ways, but it was 1.5 miles each way, and we did walk, okay? But what's the point to telling you that? That it does not matter where you came from, what your education background is. You can choose to do and be anything that you put your mind to. That's the bottom line there. All right, so after high school, We did not have money for college. We were a blue-collar family, farm family, 6 kids. We grew up where you have the money before you go and do whatever, and there was not money for college. My father worked very, very hard and provided for what we needed, but you were expected to have a job after you graduated high school, and I did. The day after I graduated high school, I had that job. And my first job was working in a manufacturing plant where we made clothing. Now think about the shirt. Someone sewed the body together, someone put the sleeves on it, someone put the collar on it, someone the cuffs on it, someone sewed on the buttons, and someone made the buttonholes. I did not like that job. A seamstress, I am not. But I worked really hard, and I tried hard, and I said after a year, I have got to get out of this. This is not my cup of tea. So I applied at our local bank, and I did get hired at the local bank, and I spent 5 years working at our local bank, and I loved that job. I really loved that job. You know, I knew everybody in the town. It wasn't a big town. It was a very small town. But people would come in every day, and I got to know people, and it was really, I enjoyed it. But you know, you can only do so much without an education working in a bank. And I had befriended this Minnesota Army National Guard soldier through coming in as a customer. And one day she walked in, again, I'd been there 5 years, and she said, "Denise, you can do so much more. I see so much more potential in you. Why don't you join the Air Force and get out of this town?" I had never thought about joining the Air Force. My father served 22 years in the Army National Guard and never talked to joining the military to any 6 of us kids. Never talked to us about joining, never talked about the benefits, the education, the skills that we would learn, any of that. So she took me 30 miles to the next town to see a recruiter. She took me there, and I listened to this recruiter, and I loved everything that man had to say. He talked to me about air traffic control, which I knew nothing about air traffic control, but boy, it sure sounded cool. 6 weeks later, I went back home. I resigned from the bank. I sold my car. I sold my furniture. I packed up my stuff, put it in Mom and Dad's attic, and 6 weeks later, I was gone. I gave up everything. My intuition, the first time I ever really listened to it, said, this is right. I went in open general, wanting air traffic control, because I said, this is gonna work out for me. It's gonna work out. So off to basic, I was a dorm chief, and at some point the TI says, "Jelinski, you got air traffic control." Yes, I was so happy. It did work out. But I had given up everything. Air traffic control school was not easy for me. Remember that education back there? It was coming back to haunt me. But I was the one at 3 o'clock in the morning with the flashlight under the covers, studying, weekends, nights, whenever I had a waking minute. I did whatever I could in order to pass that. I did very well, but boy, I studied and studied because the fear of failure drove me. And it has driven me my whole career. I'm not maybe proud to say that as a Chief Master Sergeant, but for me, the fear of failure drove me. At any course that I've ever taken, Combat Airspace Management School later on, the fear of failure drove me. I didn't have anything to go back to. Certainly my family would have welcomed me back, but I had sold everything, right? So I got through air traffic school, and orders came, and oh my gosh. And I grew up in central Minnesota, the tundra, right? I got orders to Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. Oh my gosh, I was so excited, from the tundra to sunshine and heat and warmth. Now, I was the only entire person in the entire United States Air Force that was excited about going to Laughlin Air Force Base in Texas. The only one. But it didn't matter. I was thrilled, which was very short-lived, because maybe a few weeks after that, I got orders diverting me. Yes, to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. Now, who joins the Air Force and goes 500 miles from home where the seasons didn't even change? Oh my goodness. I can tell you right now that I wasn't very excited about that. I wasn't excited about it at all. I met a young man. We fell in love. We got married. I kind of fast forward, skipping a little bit. So we got married. And a Marine, infantry and Air Force, air traffic, where are you going to be stationed together? Okay, he had 10 years in. I said, I will Palace Chase transfer into the Air National Guard. We were going to Camp Pendleton, California, so I transferred into the Cal Guard. They were supposed to be getting air traffic control. After a year and a half, I said, they are never going to get air traffic control. And so I cross-trained into ground radio operations, which I loved. I really enjoyed that. That was back in the days where you learned Morse code via cassette player. How many still know what a cassette player? No, I'm kidding. Rewind. Oh, yes. Okay. So 3 years in the Cal Guard, I was a traditional guardsman, and that's, coming off of active duty, that's when I first learned about what it meant to be a traditional guardsman, where you've got your military guard duties, part-time, 1 time a month, your 2 weeks of annual training, and you have a civilian job somewhere in the community, and oh, by the way, you have this family with all those requirements as well, and working with employers and getting off. So I get it, I gotcha, okay? So from there, my husband got orders to Hawaii. Wow, from the tundra to Hawaii. Oh, it was fabulous. The 3-year tour turned into 6 years for him. He retired, and I distinctly had this conversation with my husband when he hung up his Marine Corps hat. I said, okay, baby, it's my turn. Because there were things, as a traditional guardsman and having an active duty infantry Marine that was gone all the time, that I just wasn't able to do with a little munchkin. So the tables turned, and he became the supporter, and I was able to just really do whatever it was that I really wanted to do and support and do exercises and travel with the Guard, and it was wonderful. And in Hawaii, I, traditional guardsman, eventually became a military technician, full-time uniform wearing, had a little bit of AGR, active Guard and Reserve time, and now back on Title 10, so full circle. But in Hawaii, I was very fortunate. I was that airman that, like you, doing things right, being a good airman, being a well-rounded airman, volunteering, moved through different levels of leadership. But I always served with that mindset of contributing to the organization. And I was always prepared. And I always asked my supervisor, how can I prepare for that next opportunity? I took some strategic risks. Being at an air traffic control squadron, I eventually moved to our group headquarters, went into the combat airspace management role, and partnered with 13th Air Force there at Hickam, and it was really phenomenal to be partners with them. Eventually, became the wing command chief for the 154th Wing in the Hawaii Air Guard, the state command chief at that level, Joint Force Headquarters level, and then the tag said I was coming back from deployment. I had just been selected for the state command chief job, and the tag calls me up. Literally, I'm in transition coming back across the United States, and he said, Chief, you're going to be my senior enlisted leader. Roger that, sir. What does that mean to you, sir? And what that meant in a state was that you now have the responsibility for our enlisted corps of not only the Air National Guard within that state, but also the Army National Guard. I knew nothing about our Army National Guard at that point, but I learned quickly. I made flashcards to learn the rank. You got to do what you got to do. I had not partnered with our Army National Guard, but you figure it out. You immerse yourself, you learn, you find the smartest one and you hang under their coattails and you roll with it. It's important that you do that. Leaders, I believe that leaders make themselves available for other opportunities, that's our responsibility. So for example, as the wing command chief, of course you make yourself available to that adjutant general in the state to apply to be that state command chief. Well, equally important at this level. State leaders across our 54, Army or Air Guard, when this position came available, you're expected to apply, and I feel very strongly about that. Otherwise, take off the stripe and retire. So I applied and I made myself available. And I thought, there's not a snowball's chance in heck that this chief from Hawaii, that, the chief of the National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C. is going to select her to be his senior enlisted advisor. And lo and behold, I was very fortunate to have been selected to serve in this position. And it has been a great, great 3+ years. And it's very, very humbling for me to tell you this, and it is, because it sounds like, that I'm trying to do this, and it's not about that. I'm going to tell you this next thing because it's important that you know this, because this could be you. Last year I had the absolute privilege to interview for the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. General Welsh selected 5 individuals to compete for that position to interview, and I was one of them. And I still pinch myself to this day that I had this opportunity as an Air National Guard member to, interview for that position. My good friend, my classmate in Air Traffic Control School, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Jim Cody, of course, was selected. And so Chief Cody and I go back a long way to technical training, and his wife Athena was a class ahead of us, and I couldn't be more proud that he was selected. But how cool is that to have two controllers, same class, compete for the same position? I tell you that because it doesn't matter what component you're serving in. The Chief of Staff of our United States Air Force should be able to look across the entire spectrum. Leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter what component you're coming from that you're serving. This is one United States Air Force. That could be you. And I hope that many of the airmen sitting right here in front of me today, that you're aspiring perhaps to be a future Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. So that's a quick snapshot through kind of that progression. And I skipped along because I also wanted to leave you with some leadership reflection points. So I'm going to jump right into that in order to kind of get going through this. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, any level of success that I have achieved is because of my faith, my family, and my Air Force and Air National Guard leadership. No one gets here by themselves. So hang on tight to some coattails, and they'll ensure that they'll get you where you want to go. All right. So these leadership reflection points, they have made a difference in my career. They may not be the same for you, but I think that we're going to find some commonality in some of them. All right. So the first one, you must maintain an uncompromising foundation of core values, standards, and ethics. Words matter. Our core values matter. Live them, emulate them. Be that good role model for our core values. They're important to us. They're important to this uniform that we wear. They need to be protected. Standards. Expect the highest standards from your airmen. The airmen that you lead, set that high standard, maintain it yourself, and then just watch your airmen exceed it. If you for them, they will meet and exceed it every single time. What happens if we put that bar here? Guess what? You're going to get that too. Keep that bar held high. Expect greatness from the airmen that you lead. And ethics. Ethics. Have the courage to make an ethical decision in all that you do. If you stay true to those, that's the basis of all we do. That's the foundation of wearing this uniform and being a member of the United States Air Force and the United States military. You will continually go back to that foundation of core values, standards, and ethics. Uncompromising. You're going to face some tough challenges, no doubt about it, but keep grounded on that foundation and you will be successful. Point 2, attitude, attitude, attitude. It all starts with attitude. Remember those orders I got when I got diverted? Yeah, from Laughlin to Nebraska. Now, whoever's from Nebraska, I don't mean any insult, but I was from Minnesota. Okay, so you get my point. I kind of had a negative attitude about that. Okay, I can remember distinctly that, I stewed on that for a while. I wasn't very happy about it. I also remember distinctly, before I rolled into that base, I made a very conscious decision to change my attitude. And I decided that I was going to be the best airman I could be. I was going to work hard. I was going to train hard. I was going to volunteer. I was going to do all the things expected of me as an airman. And when I rolled into that base, that whole Laughlin thing, that was behind. This was my duty assignment, and that was some of the best days of my life. Let me tell you, it was really a great assignment. So attitude, 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 it makes a difference. It was the best decision that I made as a young airman, without question. We choose our attitude. We choose it every day. No one gives it to us, but the best thing is, no one can take it away from us either. No one can take it away. All things being equal, the supervisor, they're going to choose the airman that has the great attitude. So you need to bring it every day. Every day you need to bring that great attitude. Dr. John Maxwell, my mentor in leadership, says that your attitude will determine your altitude. And I agree 100%. Point 3, leadership reflection point 3, continual growth and self-development. I didn't go to college, but I watched leaders, and I looked at what success looks like, right? I set myself on the path of personal and professional development. You got to take control of your own career, right? You've got to place yourself in those paths and figure it out sometimes yourself. I didn't have that person guiding me and mentoring me early on in my career. Education sets you apart. Understand those tipping points because they're important. Read. Take advantage of professional development and leadership courses. They don't always come to you. Go out and look for them. Partner with active duty bases, Guard, Reserve, wherever they're holding those type of opportunities. Look for it, ask for it, seek it out and find it. Seek out mentors. Go to lunch with people, have coffee breaks, ask them how they got there, ask them their story, what worked for them, what didn't work, what advice they could give you. We just had a specialist, an Army National Guard specialist, had the opportunity last week to have lunch with the Secretary of Defense. So we prepared him, and he was prepared to ask a question to the Secretary of Defense. What kind of mentorship moment was that for him? Incredible. It was incredible. My entire career, there are 3 questions that I continually and consistently asked my supervisors. What do I need to stop doing? That really spoke to my weaknesses. There are some things that we all need to perhaps stop doing. I asked the Chief Master Sergeant that one time, who was my colleague. I said, Chief, what do I need to stop doing? Denise, you need to stop cracking that gum. It sounds like a little thing, but you know what? It annoys people, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. I don't do that anymore, okay? What do I need to start doing? There's some things that perhaps all of us need to start doing, and you may not realize it. Ask your supervisor that. And then the third thing was, what do I need to continue to do? Each and every one of you are doing great things every day for our United States Air Force and for our country. You need to continue doing those things. So ask your supervisor that. Ask a trusted friend or colleague, someone that will be honest with you, those questions. Okay, education, military and civilian. You're here. You get it. You get it full well what education means. Dr. John Maxwell, again, my mentor, says that in 5 years' time, you will be the same person except for the books you read and the people that you meet. And I would add, perhaps the people that you spend your time with as well. So choose carefully who you're spending your time with and protect that inner circle. Okay. Bottom line, be ready for for that moment when leadership calls your name. Point 4, strategic risks. Boy, this is important. I was just talking to a senior NCO this morning at breakfast, and he was risks, and that's important because you need a broad breadth of experience. You have to get that in different special duties, different assignments, etc. It's important that you prepare yourself for those future opportunities. Sometimes you have to take that step backward or in order to go forward. I can tell you that at the squadron level in the Air Guard, you are promoted based on unit vacancy. And as a senior master sergeant in E8, I was sitting in, if you will, an E9 position. So that means that if I would have stayed there long enough and filled all the things that you need for requirements, if I would have stayed there long enough, I would have been promoted to a chief master sergeant. I don't say that with arrogance, but that, I was just happened to be in that position, primed for that. But I recognized as a senior master sergeant that I had done all I could. I had been at this squadron for 12 years, and I felt like I had done all I could in developing the leaders below me to take on and assume those responsibilities that I had to go in order for them to take the reins and take it to the next level. And so I did. And there were a lot of my friends that said, "What? You're giving up the E9 slot?" Because the slot I went to, that sidestep, backstep, was an E8 position with no hope of getting promoted. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter to me because it was the right thing to do for the organization, and it was time for me to move aside so someone else could have that opportunity. If you serve with the right mindset, pure of heart, good things will come back to you. So don't be afraid to take that strategic risk. Be a first sergeant, serve outside of your AFSC. There are many different ways to get to your destination. Don't be afraid to take the risk. Multiple paths. Leadership point 5, the concept of reach. The concept of reach. Reach up. As young airmen, as NCOs, you have to reach up to your leadership. You've got to ask the questions. Seek out those mentors. Reach up. Find out, read, figure things out. That's what we're here for, to help you find your path. teachers, mentors, all those. Reach down. Reach down. We have a responsibility to mentor and help those below us to achieve greatness as well. So reach down and bring someone up with you. Reach out. Serve your communities. That volunteerism. Serve your communities at your unit, your base, your wing, in the local community for us as garden reservists. And then the last one is probably the hardest, to reach in. To reach in and know yourself. And know yourself so well that you know what your strengths are, you know what your weaknesses are, and that you're working in that strength zone, but you're very mindful of your weaknesses and you're working on those as well. Reaching in, that's tough stuff sometimes, to look within and really know yourself. But you have to do that in order to reach your maximum potential. And that's a lifelong journey and a lifelong assessment. And that reaching in is a tough one. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Leadership reflection point 6, professionalism. Know what you stand for. What is your code of conduct on and off duty? Professionalism in all things. Treat everyone with dignity and respect and include them. Diversity is a really great thing, understanding, the whole team, the characteristics, the cultures, the experiences, that whole team, that strength, and treating everyone professionally. Be the best airman that you can be, and know that professional airmen lead professional airmen. Point 7, respectfully do not take no for an answer. This was huge for me. Respectfully do not take no for an answer. Let me share a quick story here. Kind of trust but verify. Just because it's always been doesn't mean that it is, right? I had a very senior officer, a general officer in a very senior position, tell me that as a military technician, a full-time technician, that I could not be a command chief. I was a senior master sergeant. And he said that I couldn't be a command chief because I was a full-time technician. So, respectfully, sir, where would I find that information? Can you give me some guidance as to where I would look that up, where I can read about this to see what it says? He told me he'd get back to me. A couple weeks later, sir, remember that conversation that we had? Respectfully, again, I asked for direction and guidance. And it just so happens that when I got the guidance back and knew where to look and all that, it said, and I'm going to paraphrase, that although incompatible with your full-time military technician job, there is a waiver process. Trust but verify. Get in the reg, get in the AFI, ask the questions to the most senior level of leaders, but do it respectfully. But don't take no for an answer. Figure it out. You're going to have obstacles. Figure out how to get around them. And I don't mean to circumvent the system. That's not what I mean. But I mean, when you have that challenge, be that bulldog and figure it out. Around, under, over, right through. Right through. Don't take no for an answer. For all of you, you know what? 28 years in this military, do you think I've been told no a time or two? Darn straight I have. For my own family sometimes. When I was younger, they believe in me now. I wish that I could look each and every one of you in the eye. I mean, literally go up and down the row and just look you in the eye and say, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't. All right? Many people ask the question, can I? Can I? Can I? I'm encouraging you to put the how in front of that. How can I? The how assumes that it can be done. It's a different mindset. How can it be done? Okay. Point 8, have passion. You have to love what you do. If you love what you do, it's not work. It's not work. If you happen to be an AFSC, not that anyone in this audience is in an AFSC that they're just not really loving right now, but if you happen to be that person or life changes, you may get a mission role where a unit changes from one mission to another and you find yourself in a different AFSC where you're just going, oh, this is not for me. Go see your supervisor, your education office, your training office, and cross-train. Find what is your strength zone and be passionate about it. Your airmen have to see that you're excited about what you do because they're going to reflect you. So let's make sure that we're reflecting the right thing, right? We stand on the shoulders of amazing leaders. Amazing leaders. Colonel right here back with us. Amazing leaders. They paved the way for us. They broke those walls and glass ceilings and the windows they opened. Now it's your turn. It's your turn to do the same thing for the airmen that you are leading. They paved the way, and we're charged. We are charged with doing the same. Point 9, goals. Have you heard that before? Have you heard that during this, your PME here, that you have to have goals, professional and personal goals. You've got to have them. It sounds like a simple thing, but you'd be surprised how many people don't have goals and they don't write them down. You've got to write it down, and we must be driven by a sense of purpose. And if you don't know what that purpose is, how can you be, compelled to reach that, right? So write it down, visit them often, share them with your supervisor, your coworkers, your family, your spouses. You've got to write those things down and look at them often. I challenge you, as I mentioned to you yesterday when I was talking to you, don't let it be your goal. Let it be your goal to never let finances, relationships, physical fitness be something that holds you back. That should be a goal. We face those challenges. You've faced them, I've faced them. We're going to continue to face those challenges. But ensure that that's a goal, that you are working hard in those areas so it doesn't become some kind of obstacle for you. We have phenomenal resources to help with that. And the last point, and I'll wrap this up, the last point. Never, never, never quit. Don't you quit. You've got to keep going. When it gets tough, you got to reach down deep in here because you've got a little bit more in reserve. I know you do. I do certain little things with, very junior young soldiers and airmen, and bar none, every time, they've got that little bit more in reserve that they can give. Don't let anybody steal your dream. Never, never, never quit. I believe in you. Your supervisors believe in you. Your leadership believes in you. And America is counting on you. That pretty much wraps up the reflection points. Those are things that were important to me throughout 28 and a half years. I hope that you found something in there that is of value to you, that you might grab onto just maybe one golden nugget that will serve you well. I hope that you found some commonality in that. I'm going to ask airmen that you stand proud as you do today. Continue to stand proud, be courageous, lead from the front, serve pure of heart. Good things will come to you. It's all about this great institution of our United States Air Force and serving America and defending that flag. Defending that flag. And I'm going to leave you with this closing thought. I hope that by this story that you've kind of figured out that you have the power. You can choose to do and be anything that you can dream. It's a decision. Make that decision. Once you do, it releases tremendous power and sets you on that course for success. It has been my privilege spending time with you today. Congratulations on your graduation. I'm proud of you. Thank you for serving. May God bless you. May God bless the families. May He continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Would the class leader, Technical Sergeant Christopher Malave, please come forward for the presentation of the class guest speaker gift.
Chief Jalency Hall, on behalf of Class 13-4 and Class 13-3, we want to present you this gift and a plaque. And I want to thank you for your inspirational speech and thank you for your service. Thank you. Yeah.
At the Paul H. Langford EPME Center, we strive to create an academic environment that promotes professionalism and personal growth. We make every effort to further develop in our students the professional skills, knowledge, and attitudes required of leaders, supervisors, and managers in today's rapidly changing Air Force.
In pursuit of this goal, we challenge these students to comprehend and apply, to proactively participate rather than passively absorb, and to proudly lead rather than to meekly follow. We insisted on high academic standards, dedication, healthy competition, and the highest standards of personal conduct.
It is for these reasons that we believe the most significant achievement any one student can attain is a diploma. Colonel Cathcart, Chief Felch, and Chief Jelinski Hall, would you please come forward for the graduation of Non-Commissioned Officer Academy Class 13-4 and Airman Leadership School Class 13-3.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience for these graduates, so please feel free to come forward and take photos of the graduation ceremony. It is also tradition at the Paul H. Langford EPME Center that we clap one time as each student is called on stage. If you have a chant or a shout out to one of your students, please do so. And now for the moment the students have patiently waited for, graduation.
Now it's time to graduate Non-Commissioned Officer Academy Class 13-4. The instructor for A Flight is Master Sergeant Albie Zayas.
First at bat, my flight leader from A Flight for the 177th Security Forces Squadron, Egg Harbor, Township, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Mary Connolly. From the 332nd U.S. Air Force Recruiting Squadron, Nashville, Tennessee, Technical Sergeant Ryan Corbin. From the 375th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Matthew Harmon. From the U.S. Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Brian Hayes. From the 119th Command and Control Squadron, McGee Tyson, Air National Guard, Tennessee, Technical Sergeant Jeffrey Loso. From the 18th Air Force, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Patrick Mahoney. From the 4th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant James Nett. From the 166th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Newcastle Airport, Delaware, Technical Sergeant Billy Pratt. From the 628th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Jameson Pulliam. From the 158th Civil Engineer Squadron, South Burlington, Vermont, Technical Sergeant Andrew Sheldon. From the 64th Air Refueling Squadron, Pease Air Force Base, New Hampshire, Technical Sergeant Dwayne Souza. From the 375th Communications Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Tanya Wigger. From the 4th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Randy Wilhide. From the 718th Intelligence Squadron, Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, Technical Sergeant Francis Williams. From the 20th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Christopher Yanayan. And from the 132nd Maintenance Squadron, Des Moines, Iowa, Technical Sergeant David Zychek. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your team, this is my team. Not only is this the A Flight, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the A Team.
The instructor for B Flight is Technical Sergeant Beth Panozzo.
The flight leader for B Flight is from the 165th Airlift Wing, Garden City, Georgia, Technical Sergeant Chucky Delano. From the 259th Air Traffic Control Center, Alexandria, Louisiana, Technical Sergeant Alicia Batiste. From the 177th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Egg Harbor, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Nicholas Saltano. From the 157th Air Refueling Wing, Peace Air National Guard Base, Technical Sergeant Joshua Connery. From the 101st Security Force Squadron, Bangor, Maine, Staff Sergeant Douglas Connolly. From the 139th Civil Engineer Squadron, St. Joseph, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Michael Geeding. From the 169th Maintenance Squadron, McIntyre Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Jason Green. From the 14th Weather Squadron, Asheville, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Thomas Gwynn. From the 445th Air Medical Evacuation Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Mia Hostetter. From the 628th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Leo LaChapelle. From the 337th Recruiting Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Kenneth Meyer. From the 509th Medical Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Mo Morris. From the 137th Air Lift Squadron, Technical Sergeant Julio C. Rios. From the 906th Air Refueling Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant David Rivera. From the 4th Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Rebecca Russell. And from the 4th Communications Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant David Crazy Eyes Vitko. Ladies and gentlemen, B Flight.
The instructor for C Flight is Technical Sergeant Timothy Capps.
The flight leader for C Flight from the 141st Air Control Squadron, Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, Technical Sergeant Francisco Silvanoli Manuel. From the 150th Maintenance Squadron, Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, Technical Sergeant Benny Archibek. From Headquarters U.S. Air Force, Directorate A47, Washington, D.C., Technical Sergeant Taniki Barrett. From the 435th Supply Chain Operations Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Daniel Burble. From the 143rd Maintenance Squadron, North Kingstown, Rhode Island, Technical Sergeant Liza Kazi. From the 628th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Lon Fox, Jr. From Detachment 1, 20th Operations Group, Eastover, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Paul Heiser. From the 609th Air Communications Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant William Johns. From the 107th Civil Engineering Squadron, Niagara Falls, New York, Technical Sergeant Brett Johnson. From the 4th Component Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Jeffrey Lang. From the 509th Civil Engineering Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Richard Love. From the 157th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Pease Air National Guard Base, New Hampshire, Technical Sergeant Lonnie Major. From the 338th U.S. Air Force Recruiting Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Joseph Maltese. From the 117th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Birmingham, Alabama, Technical Sergeant Jacob Mayo. From the 187th Security Forces Squadron, Montgomery, Alabama, Technical Sergeant Mia Powell. And from the 437th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Carl Smith Rubin. Ladies and gentlemen, C Flight. Boom!
The instructor for D Flight is Master Sergeant Will Britt.
Our flight leader from the 108th Logistics Readiness Squadron, New Jersey Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Thea Ramadan. From the 131st Civil Engineering Squadron, Missouri Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Douglas Blaze. From the 177th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, from New Jersey Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Nelson Brown. From the 38th Cyberspace Readiness Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Justin Driggers. From the 437th Operations Support Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Shauna Drivers. From the 55th Maintenance Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Jeremy Hall. From 153rd Airlift Wing, Wyoming Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Iris Honrado. From the 143rd Civil Engineering Squadron, Rhode Island Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Roger Gillette. From the 4th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Douglas Kirby. From the 201st Airlift Squadron, Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland, Technical Sergeant Benjamin McCloskey. From Detachment 365, Air Force ROTC, MIT, Technical Sergeant Ivy Santiago. From the 183rd Airlift Squadron, Mississippi Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Ryan Smith. From Navy Engineering Support Unit Alameda, Base Alameda, California, Petty Officer 2nd Class Ryan Stimmerman. From the Secretary of the Air Force Executive Dining Facility, Pentagon, Technical Sergeant Brian Tobias. From the 4th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Martin Valentine. And from the 20th Operations Support Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Keith Wilbur. Ladies and gentlemen, D-Flight.
The instructor for E-Flight is Technical Sergeant Jason Goodman.
The flight leader for E-Flight from the 177th Civil Engineering Squadron, Atlantic City Air Base, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Raymond Wayne. From the 148th Security Forces Squadron, Duluth, Minnesota, Technical Sergeant Matthew Angle. From the 163rd Logistics Readiness Squadron, March Air Base, California, Technical Sergeant Chantel Darensberg. From the 4th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Jordan DeVries. From National Reconnaissance Office, Los Angeles, California, Technical Sergeant Nick Gialago. From Detachment 1, 364th Training Squadron, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Aaron Glavy. From 66 Medical Squadron, Hanscom Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Richard LaFlame. From San Juan, Puerto Rico Military Entrance Processing Station, San Juan, Puerto Rico Military Entrance Processing Station, Petty Officer 1st Class Jansen Lewis. From 4th Component Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Clifford McMichael. From the 237th Intelligence Squadron, Nashville, Tennessee, Technical Sergeant Sherman Miller. From the 140th Maintenance Squadron, Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, Technical Sergeant Michael Neely. From the 125th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Jacksonville, Florida, Technical Sergeant Christopher Nolan. From Air Force Space Cyberspace Support Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Fabian Quintero. From 628 Logistics Readiness Squadron, Joint Base Charleston, Technical Sergeant Monique Rock. From 338th United States Air Force Recruiting Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Josh Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, the extraordinary E-Flight.
The instructor for F-Flight is Technical Sergeant Jeremy Hunt.
Our flight leader from the 177th Security Forces Squadron, Egg Harbor, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Keith Curtis. From the 4th Component Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Lindy Boykin. From the 261st Network Warfare Squadron, California Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Kevin Chan. From the 227th Air Support Operations Squadron, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Christopher Donahue. Not with us today. From the 88th Diagnostic and Therapeutic Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Christopher Fleming. From the 910th Security Forces Squadron, Youngstown Air Reserve Station, Technical Sergeant Tanya Fox. From the 20th Reconnaissance Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Kevin Glass. From the 201st Airlift Squadron, Andrews Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Eugene Lasiza. From the Training and Education Center, McGee Tyson Joint National Guard Base, Technical Sergeant Amber Monio. From the 375th Comptroller Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Kiff Noonan. From Detachment 5, 373rd Training Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Carl Newton. From the 119th 4th Support Squadron, North Dakota Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Kurt Siegert. From the 4th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson, Technical Sergeant Robert Sosa. From the 164th Airlift Squadron, Ohio Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Brian Thompson. From the Tennessee Air National Guard Headquarters, Tennessee Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Stephen West. From the 20th Logistic Readiness Squadron, Shoal Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Stephen Zelke. Ladies and gentlemen, F-Flight.
The instructor for G Flight is Master Sergeant Jose Augusto Gonzalez.
Our flight leader from the 118th Civil Engineering Squadron, Nashville, Tennessee, Technical Sergeant Charles Crick. From the 88th Communications Group, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Michael Bookhart. From the 628th Comptroller Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Kamisha Brown. From the 372nd Training Squadron, Detachment 1, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Mark Dalton. From the 4th Security Forces, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Gerard Davis. From the 311th Security Squadron, Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, Technical Sergeant Eric Hurley. From Headquarters, Air Mobility Command, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Andrew Jarvis. From the 222nd Intel Support Squadron, Beale Air Force Base, Staff Sergeant Mark Lange. From the 509th Medical Squadron, Medical Operations Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Barbara Lay. From the 452nd Maintenance Squadron, Mars Air Reserve Base, Technical Sergeant Jeremy McComber. From the 119th 4th Support Squadron, Fargo, North Dakota, Technical Sergeant Daniel Mathis. From the 177th Civil Engineer Squadron, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant David Nitsuiatek. From the 171st Maintenance Squadron, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Technical Sergeant Stephen Paris. From Air Force ROTC, Detachment 88, Sacramento, California, Technical Sergeant Michael Pritchett. From the 169th Operations Support Flight, Columbia, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Charlene Schuler. From the 20th 4th Support Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Evan Singleton. Ladies and gentlemen, this is G Flight.
The instructor for H Flight is Technical Sergeant Drew Carson.
Your flight leader from the 119th 4th Support Squadron from Fargo, North Dakota, Technical Sergeant Tiffany Jasmine. From the 177th Comptroller Flight, Egg Harbor, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Elisa Balsiero. Nice, nice. From the 15th Operational Weather Support Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Guillermo Belfort. From the 192nd Maintenance Squadron, Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, Technical Sergeant Michael Burnett. From the 20th Reconnaissance Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Jamarco Clinton. From the 20th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Kevin Delavara. From the 155th Maintenance Squadron, Lincoln, Nebraska, Technical Sergeant John Garza. From the 4th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, aka Shady J, Technical Sergeant Dale Hill. From the 123rd Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Louisville, Kentucky, Technical Sergeant Philip Johnson. Go Cards. From the 731st Airlift Squadron, Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, Technical Sergeant Christopher Lindquist. From the 337th U.S. Air Force Recruiting Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Sean McGlynn. From the Air Force Life Cycle Management Cell, Force Protection Branch, Hanscom Air Force Base, Massachusetts, Technical Sergeant Timothy Sigafus. From the 375th Aeromed Evacuation Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Eric Staling. From the 1st Combat Camera Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Samantha Vasquez. From the 88th Air Base Wing, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Philip Washington. From the 168th Security Forces Squadron, Eielson Air Force Base, Alaska, and our very own Alaska State Trooper, he's on the TV show, Technical Sergeant Brian Zeisel.
Ladies and gentlemen, H-Flight. The instructor for I-Flight is Technical Sergeant Timothy Fry.
The class leader from 13-4 from 156 Airlift Squadron, Charlotte, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Christopher Malve. The flight leader from the 117th Operations Support Squadron, Birmingham, Alabama, Technical Sergeant Timothy Young. From the 211th Engine Install Squadron, Anvil, Pennsylvania, Technical Sergeant Seth Clark. From the 4th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Ryan Dorian. From the 628th Aerospace Medicine Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Veronica Dudley. From 20th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Donald Gleason. From 177th Maintenance Operations Squadron, Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Michelle Grave. From the 4th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Andrew Hawley. From the 709th Munitions Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Jennifer Huber. From the 123rd Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Louisville, Kentucky, Technical Sergeant Terrence Jones. From Detachment 1, 101 Air Operations Group, Tyndall Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Henry Joseph. From the Secretary of the Air Force Inspector General, Washington, D.C., Technical Sergeant Salim Khan. From the 509th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Jeffrey Miller. From United States Air Force Aerospace Medical Squadron, Wright-Patt Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Gene Mall. From the 375th Communications Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Nathan Moore. From the 177th Civil Air Engineer Squadron, Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Michael Sears. Ladies and gentlemen, we broke the curse. This is the I-Flight.
The instructor for J-Flight is Technical Sergeant Tony Hoover.
The flight leader for J-Flight from the 141 Air Refueling Squadron, Joint Base McGuire-Dix, Lakehurst, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Patrick Ogle. From the 177 Security Forces Squadron, 177 Fighter Wing, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Stanley Carroll. From the 437th Maintenance Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Josette Francis. From the 313th U.S. Air Force Recruiting Squadron, North Syracuse, New York, Technical Sergeant Paul Garces. From the 618th Air and Space Operations Center, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Marcus Garrett. From the 123rd Global Mobility Readiness Squadron, Louisville, Kentucky, Technical Sergeant Travis Greenwell. From the 125th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Jacksonville, Florida, Technical Sergeant Jeremy Hartley. From the 509th Civil Engineering Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Warren Harrington. From the 338 Training Squadron, Fort Gordon, Georgia, Technical Sergeant Alan Marks. From the 162nd Logistics Readiness Squadron, Tucson, Arizona, Technical Sergeant Von D. Martin. From the 174th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Hancock Field, New York, Technical Sergeant Dennis Patterson. From the Operations Detachment 7, Chantel, Virginia, Technical Sergeant Justin Peters. From the 20th Maintenance Ops Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Ella Marie Powell. From the 4th Component Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant William Sanders. From the 88th Forces Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Timothy Volk. And from the 88th Medical Support Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Michael Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, J-Flight.
The instructor for K-Flight is Technical Sergeant Brad Evans.
Thank you. Our flight leader from the 108th Security Forces Squadron, Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, Technical Sergeant Charles Hester. From the 117th Civil Engineering Squadron, Birmingham, Alabama, Technical Sergeant Christopher Cooley. From the 118th Force Support Squadron, Nashville, Tennessee, Technical Sergeant Richard Ederling. From the 101st Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Bangor, Maine, Technical Sergeant Tammy German. From the 184th Regional Support Group, Kansas Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Eric Jacobson. From the 4th Maintenance Group, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant James Melton. From the 178th Medical Group, Springfield, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Dwayne Rich. From the 906th Air Refueling Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Jason Rude. From the 645th I know him too. From the 645th Aeronautical Systems Group, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Jeffrey Shatroma. From the 373rd Training Squadron, Joint Base Charleston, Technical Sergeant Michael Simmerling. From the 509th Civil Engineering Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Joshua Stone Street. From the 185th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Sioux City, Iowa, Technical Sergeant Kimberly Svensson. From the 311th Air Force Recruiting Squadron, Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania, Technical Sergeant Kenneth Volley. From the 4th Civil Engineering Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Taiwansane Walls. From the Logistics Support Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Lindsey Wigdon. And from the 20th Force Support Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Siobhan Williams. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, K-Flight, Team BAMP.
The instructor for L-Flight is Technical Sergeant Ryan Houston.
Flight leader for L-Flight from the 177th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Colleen Ryan. From the 166th Communications Flight from Newcastle County Airport, Delaware, Technical Sergeant Casey Carter. From the 143rd Civil Engineering Squadron, from North Kingston, Rhode Island, Technical Sergeant Don Cartwright Elnicki. From the 88th Air Base Wing, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Carlos Camas. From the 175th Operations Flight, from Warfield Air National Guard Base, Maryland, Technical Sergeant Jason Conley. From the 4th Security Forces Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Elmar Dabu. From the 119th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Fargo, North Dakota, Technical Sergeant Terry Davis. From Whiteman Air Force, disregard, 509th Security Forces Squadron, from Whiteman's Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant John Flores. From 177th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Anthony Gonzalez. From the 64th Air Refueling Squadron, Peace Air National Guard Base, New Hampshire, Technical Sergeant James Gregory.
From the 88th Force Support Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Ronald Marshall. From the 911th Air Refueling Squadron, Seymour Johnson, Technical Sergeant Air Mayhew. 347th Recruiting Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Chad Myers. 156th Maintenance Squadron, Puerto Rico Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Luis Rodriguez. From the 156th Maintenance Squad, 54th Airlift Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Jater Thompson. 628th Medical Operations Squadron, Joint Base Charleston, Technical Sergeant James Varney. Ladies and gentlemen, L Flight.
The instructor for M Flight is Technical Sergeant Carrie Chandler.
Starting with the flight sergeant for M Flight, from the 140th Maintenance Squadron, Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, Technical Sergeant Philip Kistler. From the Military Entrance Processing Station, Louisville, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Jason Alexander. Detachment 2, 20th Operations Group, Homestead Air Reserve Base, Florida, Technical Sergeant Martin Ballard. From the Air Force Headquarters, Pentagon, Washington, D.C., Technical Sergeant Jenny Collins. From the 108th Security Forces Squadron, Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Christopher Gable. From the 628th Medical Group, Joint Base Charleston, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Stephen Hall. From Detachment 590, Reserve Officer Training Corps, Southeast Region, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Angela Karashon. From the 4th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Lincoln Marston. From the 509th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Philip McKinney. From 177th Maintenance Group, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Mark Peranto. From National Air and Space Intelligence Center, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Barry Rowland. From 127th Weather Flight, Topeka, Kansas, Technical Sergeant Corey Sherwood. From 437th Maintenance Squadron, Joint Base Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Matthew Smolsky. From 932nd Force Support Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Van Thompson. From the 118th Operation Support Flight, Nashville, Tennessee, Technical Sergeant Brandon Wright. Last but certainly not least, from the 270th Air Traffic Control Squadron, Klamath Falls, Air National Guard, Oregon, Technical Sergeant Ladiska Wright. Ladies and gentlemen, the magnificent, motivated members of M-Flight.
The instructor for N Flight is Technical Sergeant Brandy Kelly.
From the 101st Civil Engineering Squadron, Bangor, Maine, Technical Sergeant Douglas Sear. From the 164th Airlift Squadron, Mansfield, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Stephen Johnny Cochran. From the 108th Security Forces Squadron, Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Purvis, not Cooley, but Coley. From National Air and Space Intelligence Center, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Gail Cox. From the 144th Force Support Squadron, Fresno, California, Technical Sergeant Jim Followell. From Detachment 1, 364th Training Squadron, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Jason Friday. From the 20th Civil Engineering Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant David Dirtboy Mitchell. From Detachment 600, Air Force ROTC, Southeast Region, Greenville, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Maria Morozic. From the 509th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Roy Murray. From the 628th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Joint Base Charleston, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Jimmy Morrell. From the 437th Maintenance Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Jonica Parker. From the 125th Special Tactics Squadron, Portland, Oregon, Technical Sergeant D.G. Nicholas Raya. From the 437th Maintenance Operations Squadron, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant John Royce. From Air Force Central Command, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant William Shubrook. Ladies and gentlemen, with the motto of N is for knowledge, N flight.
The instructor for O Flight is Technical Sergeant Don Noel.
The flight leader for O Flight from the 157th Medical Group, Pease Air National Guard Base, Technical Sergeant Michael Dame. From the 144th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Fresno, California Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Carl Catrone. From the 4th Operation Support Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Melissa Downer. From the 375th Communications Support Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant John Farron. From the 122nd Air Support Operations Squadron, Louisiana Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Andrew Gidry. From the 906 Air Refueling Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Othello Harris. From the 177th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Nicole Horn. From the 4th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Mark Jacobs. From the 20th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Kwanzaa Joins. From the 18th Intelligence Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Albert Letourneau. From the 910th Medical Squadron, Youngstown Air Reserve Station, Technical Sergeant Jorge Mendez. From the U.S. Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Samuel Ortiz. From the 4th Maintenance Operations Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Luis Dukes. And unable to be with us today is Technical Sergeant Anthony Tiller from the 911th Air Refueling Wing. Ladies and gentlemen, the O Flight.
The instructor for P Flight, Master Sergeant John Learman.
The flight leader for P Flight from the 120th Logistics Readiness Squadron, Great Falls, Montana, Technical Sergeant Dina Sullivan. From the 4th Operations Support Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Brandy Braveboy. From the 188th Maintenance Squadron, Fort Smith, Arkansas, Technical Sergeant Ricky Brown. From the 20th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant David Burke. From the 203rd Red Horse Squadron, Virginia Beach, Virginia, Technical Sergeant Thomas Schaube. From the 88th Comptroller Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Paul Farrington. From the 141st Air Control Squadron, Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, Technical Sergeant Nestor Guevara. From Detachment 220, Air Force ROTC, Northeast Region, West Lafayette, Indiana, Technical Sergeant Shakina Holt. From the 437th Maintenance Squadron, Joint Base Charleston, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Michael Ocampo. From the 203rd Red Horse Squadron, Virginia Beach, Virginia, Technical Sergeant Jack Peed. From the 177th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, Atlantic City, New Jersey, Technical Sergeant Ralph Salvina, Jr. From the 618th Air and Space Operations, Civil Engineering, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Michael Stanley. From the 136th Airlift Squadron, Niagara Falls, New York, Technical Sergeant Sammy Vasquez. From the 168th Air Support Operations Squadron, Peoria, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Stephen Walters. From the 4th Equipment Maintenance Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, Technical Sergeant Mitchell Wilson. And from the 509th Security Forces Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Adam Wittenbach. Ladies and gentlemen, P Flight. The instructor for Q Flight is Master Sergeant Michael Caracolia.
Our flight leader from the 177th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, New Jersey Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Peter Borchester. From the 931st Civil Engineering Squadron, McConnell Air Force Base, Kansas, Technical Sergeant Howard Burns. From the 178th Comptroller Flight, Ohio Air National Guard, Staff Sergeant Jeffrey Dix. From the 4th Maintenance Operations Squadron, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Technical Sergeant Jason Hamrick. From the 164th Security Forces Squadron, Tennessee Air National Guard, Staff Sergeant Aaron Harrington. From the 171st Logistics Readiness Squadron, Pennsylvania Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Taryn Heim. From the Headquarters, United States Air Force, Director of Support, Pentagon, Technical Sergeant Justin Hollingsworth. From the 20th Operations Group, Detachment 1, McIntyre Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Philip Johnson. From the 184th Regional Support Group, Detachment 1, Kansas Air National Guard, Technical Sergeant Chase Liphart. From the Air Force Central Command, Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, Technical Sergeant Jeffrey McCready. From the 319th United States Air Force Recruiting Squadron, Waterville, Maine, Technical Sergeant Jason Moore. From the 88th Diagnostic and Therapeutic Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Sue Ellen Rodriguez. From the 375th Civil Engineering Squadron, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Jeremy Rose. From the United States Air Force Aerospace Medical Squadron, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, Technical Sergeant Adam Tyler. From the 509th Medical Operations Squadron, Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, Technical Sergeant Tarina Waiganjo. From the United States Transcom, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Technical Sergeant Matthew Wireman.
Ladies and gentlemen, Flight Q. That's who.
Now it is time to graduate Airman Leadership School, Class 13-3. The A Flight Instructor, Technical Sergeant Nicole Lemieux.
Ladies and gentlemen, that would be newly promoted Technical Sergeant Nicole Lemieux. Give her a hand.
The flight leader for A Flight from the 133rd Medical Group, Minnesota Air National Guard, Staff Sergeant Mercy Sand. From the 142nd Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron, Senior Airman Robin Borja. From the 133rd Logistics Readiness Squadron, Minnesota Air National Guard, Senior Airman Rory Caniff. From the 269th Combat Communications Squadron, Ohio Air National Guard, Senior Airman Justin Deal. From the 446th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, McCord Air Force Base, Washington, Senior Airman Jason Gontinez. From the 149th Combat Communications Squadron, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Christopher Howe. From the 34th Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron, Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, Senior Airman Courtney Giuliano. From the 134th Force Support Squadron, Tennessee Air National Guard, Senior Airman Cameron Lale. From Det 1, Connecticut Air National Guard, Connecticut A&G, Senior Airman Nicole LeBlanc. From the 172nd Logistics Readiness Squadron, Mississippi Air National Guard, Senior Airman Matt Raspberry. From the 146th Logistics Readiness Squadron, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Zachary Rude. From the 270th Air Traffic Control Squadron, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Brady Sattel. From the 132nd Fighter Wing, Iowa Air National Guard, Senior Airman Jared Vickroy. And from the 103rd Security Forces Squadron, Connecticut Air National Guard, Senior Airman Stephen Young. Ladies and gentlemen, A Flight.
The instructor for B Flight, Technical Sergeant Jenny Sanchez.
Our flight leader for B Flight from the 128th Air Control Squadron, Wisconsin Air National Guard, Senior Airman Nicholas Jenks. From the 106th Rescue Wing, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Joseph Cacoperdo. From the 178th Fighter Wing, Ohio Air National Guard, Senior Airman Marcia Christmas. From the 910th Force Support Squadron, Youngstown Air Reserve Base, Senior Airman Glisette Del Valle. From the 123rd Air Control, Ohio Air National Guard, Senior Airman Michael Dubell. From the 482nd Fighter Wing, Homestead Air Reserve Air Force Base, Senior Airman Mark Edwards. From the 107th Airlift Wing, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Stacy Gladder. From the 107th Airlift Wing, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Jordan Cara. From the 173rd Fighter Wing, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Martin Monty. From the 101st Air Refueling Wing, Maine Air National Guard, Senior Airman Chad Stanley. From the 302nd Force Support Squadron, Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado, Senior Airman Chestina Staten. And from the 512th Airlift Wing, Dover Air Force Base, Delaware, Senior Airman Marcia Triana Martinez. From the 173rd Fighter Wing, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Anthony Tyree. From the 183rd Fighter Wing, Illinois Air National Guard, Senior Airman Adam Wild. And from the 173rd Fighter Wing, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Nicoli Zalunardo. Ladies and gentlemen, B Flight.
The instructor for C Flight, Staff Sergeant Crystal Coleman.
The flight leader for C Flight from the 119th Civil Engineering Squadron, North Dakota Air National Guard, Senior Airman Alan Negron. From the 161st Logistics Readiness Squadron, Arizona Air National Guard, Senior Airman Anthony Anderson. From the 145th Logistics Readiness Squadron, North Carolina Air National Guard, Senior Airman Timothy Degree. From the 245th Air Traffic Control Squadron, South Carolina Air National Guard, Senior Airman Brandon Fost. From the 106th Logistics Readiness Squadron, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Kathleen Ford. From the 144th Force Support Squadron, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Elizabeth Frere. From the 173rd Security Forces Squadron, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman James Lockram. From the 173rd Security Forces Squadron, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Amanda Mathis. From the 192nd Supply Chain Maintenance Squadron, Langley Air Force Base, Senior Airman Myra Moore. From the 114th Security Forces Squadron, South Dakota Air National Guard, Senior Airman Tyler Phelps. From the 106th Security Forces Squadron, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Joe Pico. From the 106th Rescue Wing, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Corey Schwartz. From the 126th Air Refueling Wing, Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, Senior Airman Kennedy C. From the 433rd Security Forces Squadron, Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, Senior Airman Brazil Segura. Ladies and gentlemen, C Flight.
The instructor for D Flight, Technical Sergeant Cable Rose.
Yes, Chief. The flight leader from the 203rd Red Horse Squadron, Virginia Air National Guard, Staff Sergeant Andres Castro. From the 149th Maintenance Squadron, Texas Air National Guard, Senior Airman Jeremy Alexander. From the 129th Security Forces Squadron, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Roberto Alvarez. From Headquarters, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Austin Ashe. From the 173rd Fighter Wing, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Rodney Clark. From the 117th Comptroller Flight, Alabama Air National Guard, Senior Airman Marvell Granville. From the 158th Fighter Wing, Vermont Air National Guard, Senior Airman Sean Hamill. From the 144th Fighter Wing, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Jeanette Mora Chavez. From the 107th Operations Support Flight, New York Air National Guard, Senior Airman Sean Namira. From the 163rd Communications Flight, California Air National Guard, Senior Airman Joshua Paredes. From the 140th Comptroller Flight, Colorado Air National Guard, Senior Airman Young Shin. From the 433rd Operations Support Squadron, Texas Air National Guard, Senior Airman Natasha Todd Gonzalez. From the 114th Security Forces Squadron, South Dakota Air National Guard, Senior Airman Tucker Ulmer. From the 173rd Fighter Wing, Oregon Air National Guard, Senior Airman Amy Wyatt. Ladies and gentlemen, I have nothing clever to say. D-Flight.
We would like to recognize one final time the graduates of the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy Class 13-4 and the Airman Leadership School of Class 13-3. Congratulations to all of our graduates. Finally, we would like to recognize a group of professional airmen that pour their heart and soul into enlisted professional education. Would the instructors and staff of the Paul H. Langford EPME Center please stand and be recognized? Hunt, not Houston.
Technical Sergeant Ryan Houston and Staff Sergeant Crystal Coleman, would you please come forward for the honor flight presentation?
The Honor Flight program is designed to instill a spirit of healthy competition between flights. The distinction of Honor Flight is awarded to flights who meet the weekly minimum requirements for physical fitness, group study, and community service. Additionally, these flights must conduct themselves with honor by avoiding discipline problems, learning the Airman's Creed, and by meeting all required administrative deadlines. At this time, we would like the following flights to stand and be recognized for achieving the distinction of Honor Flight. NCOA B, D Flight, that's Delta Flight, F, G, H, I Flight, and ALSC. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your honor flights. Great job, you guys. Now everybody be seated, please.
The Top Honor Flight Award recognizes the flight that contributed the most in the areas of physical fitness, group study, and community service. The NCOA Top Honor Flight had the following totals: human performance points, 1,932, group study hours, 433, and community service, 218. For NCOA Class 13-4, the Top Honor Flight Award goes to G Flight with a total of 2,583 points. Congratulations. The Top ALS Honor Flight had the following totals: human performance points, 1,009, group study hours, 367, community service, 33. The ALS Class 13-3 Top Honor Flight Award goes to C Flight with 1,407 points. Good job. Would the honor flight representatives from NCOA G Flight and ALS C Flight please join us on stage? And with the commandants, Chief Felch, please join us on stage as well for a photo.
And at this time, would our staff community project representatives, Technical Sergeant Jason Goodman, and again, Staff Sergeant Crystal Coleman, please come forward for our community service acknowledgements.
Hello again. During the last several weeks at the Paul H. Langford EPME Center, the ALS and NCOA classes have been presented with the opportunity to participate in community projects and give something back to the community. This is not a requirement for graduation. However, it is a selfish initiative for the students to embrace the local population and display the professionalism they embody every day. We are proud of what they have done for the surrounding areas, and we are grateful for their open and welcoming attitude towards the community. The following is a quick synopsis of just some of their accomplishments.
NCOA Class 13-4 contributed 604 hours of community service and raised $2,848 to base beautification initiatives, Habitat for Humanity, Blount County Humane Society, Airmen Against Drunk Driving, Medic Blood Drive, Walter Reed Society, CAC AmeriCorps, Amputee Blade Runners, and the Fisher House.
ALS Class 13-3 contributed 100 hours of community service to Habitat for Humanity, Rural Metro Fire Station, 4 Chicks and a Cat. Airmen Against Drunk Driving, and recycling.
Not mentioned yet, but combined total, NCOA Class 13-4 and ALS Class 13-3 took up a collection for the Ronald McDonald House. And all flights in both classes selflessly contributed money to this very worthy cause. In all, they raised $1,000 for the Ronald McDonald House. Tech Sergeant Batiste from B Flight and Miss Sue Beverly, who is the executive director from the Ronald McDonald House, would y'all please come forward for the presentation of the check?
Thank you, Technical Sergeant Goodman and Staff Sergeant Coleman.
Chief Felch, would you please come forward for final comments? Technical Sergeant Malave, please join Chief Felch on stage.
You know, as we draw the ceremony to a close, I just have to mention our student leaders. And representing our student leaders, of course, are, you stand up here, but all of them worked with you, for you, and surrounding you to keep this class going. Ladies and gentlemen, on my right, what I want to explain to you is that our student leadership takes care of all of the non-academic types of issues, all of the non-task issues, so those staff and faculty members that stood up and we applauded for can do their jobs of giving out good education. And I want to thank all of the student leaders representing them. I would like to present you, sir, with my Commandant coin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Students of classes NCO Academy 13-4 and Airman Leadership School 13-3, I salute each and every one of you for your accomplishments over the past weeks, culminating in your successful completion of resident enlisted professional military education. As you return to your homes, families, work centers, co-workers, supervisors, and subordinates, may the memories of your time here shape the way you think, the way you act, and the way you react. May your experiences and new knowledge motivate you to continually strive for personal and professional growth. Travel safely, good luck, and Godspeed.